Thank you, Marilyn. So we're going to get started. If you just give me a moment, I will share my screen. But welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining. As more and more people will come in, they'll be welcomed and to use the chat again that Marilyn talked about. So we have a short introduction. So welcome and thank you everyone for joining us today. This is the Building the Next Economy event. This is our third event in a series of 7 around sustainability in the region and overall. We have this focus on sustainability. My name is Adam Thackeray, and I'm joined today with Rosalind Morrison, who is the chair of the Institute. We will be your co-moderators for today's event, so welcome. In addition, speaking earlier was Marilyn Struthers, who will be one of the lead facilitators, as well as we have Catherine Daw as an additional lead facilitator. Before we get started into some more details of the event, I'd like to take a minute to do and make a statement of acknowledgement. And if you forgive me, I will be reading a little bit to make sure that I capture the essence and the noted pieces of the acknowledgement. So we would like to begin by acknowledging that we are assembled on lands that have been occupied for over 8,000 years. We are gathered on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Nation, the Petun, and later the traditional territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, and the members of the Three Fires Confederacy, Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Ojibwe. The Huron-Wendat and the Haudenosaunee nations have also worked their territory over this time. These First Peoples are the past, present, and future caretakers of this land. This land is also home to many other diverse nations, including the Inuit and Métis people, both past and present. We are grateful for the opportunity to share in the riches of Southern Georgian Bay and its neighboring territories and to steward this land together. Thank you. So next, I want to take a moment to welcome and thank the design team. So this design team has spent many, many weeks preparing for this event and the rest of the events. There's a lot of great individuals who are involved. Obviously, you can see there's an extensive list of individuals on this design team. Without their help, without their volunteering, planning week over week, we wouldn't have this event. And so they look forward and we look forward to delivering a memorable experience for you that we feel will be of tremendous value to all those participating. Next, we also have collaboration with a number of municipalities and organizations that are both lead partners and supporting partners to help us to be able to put these events on. Again, without the support, help, and collaboration of these individuals and organizations, we would not be able to provide this for you today. So again, this is the third in our 7-part series. We have these taking place beginning in February. They take place until the fall timeframe. We've seen a lot of tremendous value. We've had over 147 people register for today's event, and there's been a steady increase event over event with the participation. So it's a great acknowledgement that we're seeing more and more engagement from the community. So thank you for your participation. A quick reminder that we are in alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals. Specifically, one of the main focuses is around SDG 11, so that's around building sustainable cities and communities. And one of the big pieces for the events is we want to ensure that we have outcomes and goals assigned to the event so that we are driving value and we look to have action that's going to come from it afterwards. So we want to introduce the idea of a local economy that is green and serves 3 pieces: people, planet, as well as profit. We have 2 great speakers here today to talk about different ideas around economic reform. We want to weave in the idea of sustainable communities and the designing of an economic reform into a single regional community conversation. And then around process, so what are we going to actually do about this? So we're going to engage the community in sustainable economic reform. We want to harvest a wish list. So we're going to go through idea generation with you through breakout sessions to get sustainable outcomes that will inform some goal setting we can look to do projects for down the road. And we want to develop a short paper from this discussion that widens the conversation around designing economic reforms to create sustainability. So again, reminder, we will have breakout sessions a little later on in today's event. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Rosalind Morrison to continue our event for today.
That's great. Thanks, Adam. And just before I introduce our 2 fabulous speakers for today, I wanted to thank all of you who responded to the post-event survey from March. Clearly, you stated that you'd like some more breakout session time to get really involved in some of the issues that were being discussed. So in response, the design team has designed for today a 15-minute breakout session. We have 10 wonderful facilitators lined up, and you will be able to think about this question and talk about it. If we were 10 times bolder, what would we do to design our economy that sustains our communities? What would we be doing differently? So I'll let you think about that. And it is now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Toby Heaps. Toby is the CEO and editor-in-chief of Corporate Knights, the company leading the charge on an idea called clean capitalism. As early as 2005, he was spearheading new ideas, such as the annual global ranking of the world's 100 most sustainable corporations. Before founding Corporate Knights, Toby was the managing editor of two magazines, Mutual Fund Review and Planning for Profits. He's been published in the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Toronto Star, and the Globe and Mail. A little known fact about Toby, in 1998, he played center field for Yugoslavia's national baseball team. Please join me in welcoming Toby Heaps.
Thanks, Rosalind. And if I may just, as a point, what amount of time should I frame my remarks? Because I can—
10 minutes.
10, perfect. Okay, 10 minutes. So a real pleasure to be here, and also awesome to see the communities getting together in South Georgian Bay to really start to be shapers rather than takers of what kind of future we're going to have there. And for me, this actually feels like kind of like a bit of a homecoming. So when I grew up, I spent summers on Christian Island, and playing baseball there in the school grounds, and swimming and kayaking off, and it was really kind of a place of refuge and solace and nourishment. And then after halfway through university, I went into the Army. I did my basic training in Meaford, and that was kind of an opposite experience. It was more of an experience of trauma, but it was all in all not a bad experience. And then it's great to have Tanya here too, who's been a bit of a mentor for me, and used to be founded the location in Toronto, the Center for Social Innovation, where Corporate Knights used to be located. So I'm just going to, if I can, I have some pictures that I want to show. So if I can share my screen, I'm not sure if I can be made a co-host so I can share my screen. But
I think you should be.
Yeah, give me 1 sec there.
Okay, thanks. Okay, great. So 10 minutes, so I'll talk, I'll try and cover the essential points and just kind of go through it. But everyone, I'm assuming everyone can see my screen okay?
Yep, we
Okay,
see the
great.
whole presentation, and now
great.
it's on slideshow, and I'll just give you a signal when you're 1 minute to go.
Perfect. Okay. So this is a map that our art director drew of what kind of Canada we could have by 2030 if we get serious today and build back better coming out of the pandemic. It's really a once in a generation opportunity to make major public investments for major public goals, to put us on a much healthier, more prosperous, more caring, and more aligned with the planet tract. So what we did is, beginning of the pandemic, we converged a whole series of roundtables with people across the country, including cabinet ministers and environmentalists and captains of industry. And we looked at what would it cost for the country in terms of what kind of investment would be required to do the maximum decarbonization of our homes, workplaces, the grid, accelerating electric vehicle uptake in terms of greening mobility, building back some of our forest natural capital, and really looking at our farms as a carbon positive opportunity, not as sort of a sink for fertilizers that bankrupt and put farmers into debt. And then looking at industry where we could really have opportunities for innovation in the resource sector and the battery sector. What we found was these red slices here are the amount of public investment that's required at the front end to catalyze the blue investment, which would come in mostly from the private sector, once the costs come down a little bit and some of the rules are improved to really even level the playing field. And the reason this works so well is we're at a bit of a tipping point in terms of many of the technologies we need to green the economy. 10, 20 years ago, some were economic, most were not. Today, many are economic, if not most. And so now the gravitational forces of economics are working in favor of the planet. And so what we found is for a relatively modest federal investment, not by historical standards, but by sort of more sort of current standards in the pandemic, for about $100 billion across the economy over 10 years, mostly front loaded in the first 5 years, from the federal government, paired with some improvements in some of the rules in terms of zoning and giving free access to green energy and storage to the grid. We could catalyze about seven times that from the private sector and bring about dramatic reductions in our greenhouse gas emissions, create a large number of jobs, 6 million job years across the country, regionally and spread out regionally, and also save a lot of money in terms of reductions in energy costs for homeowners and business operators, and also for anyone who drives, bringing about a lot of reductions in terms of the cost of fuel and electricity. So when we looked at this, you kind of break it out, you ask yourself, we're talking about the economy, green economy. What is that? What is the economy? And this pie here really kind of lays out, this is the economy. This is, it's what we spend money on. And the top 4 things that we spend money on, number 1 is shelter. That's about a quarter of household expenditures. Number 2 is transportation. And then number 3 is energy. And number 3 is food. Number 4 is energy. So you can see here the average household expenditure across the country in Canada. And so this is what drives the economy. And so this is where the opportunities are. So this slide here, and anybody who's curious about this, I'll put it in the link in the chat. We have a big long report that goes into all the details of the country. But really what we're talking about with this opportunity of building back better with greener homes and workplaces, it's about getting off fossil fuel powered inefficient homes and workplaces and getting onto passive net zero electrified energy efficient homes that are resilient to things like floods and come more comfortable, and also and this is counterintuitive, result in cheaper electricity bills, because we know rural Ontario, there's a real concern about high electricity, postage stamp, the high costs of getting electricity have been a real pain point. And if this is done correctly with the deep retrofit, energy efficiency retrofit, and substituting the gas for the heat pump, which does use electricity that wasn't previously being used, the net effect on electricity because of the dramatic energy efficiency improvements made is actually that we need less electricity, not more. It's kind of counterintuitive. You electrify your homes and you need less electricity, but you have to do it and pair it together with the deep energy efficiency retrofits. And there are great examples of communities across rural Ontario over the last 50 years who have done sort of mass mobilizations with mass retrofit programs. And we're living at an interesting time where if there is a community submission to do a mass kind of energy efficiency retrofit and electrification, there is now willing and interested ears in Ottawa to look at financing those types of things. So anybody who's interested in that, I think there's some really interesting opportunities to do mass mobilization. And you get reduced costs when you can do it at a community level too. There's all sorts of opportunities for economies of scale and for doing modularization and for doing district heating and cooling. So the next one is mobility. It's really going from the Model T to the Teslas and electrifying transport. Key here and takeaway is it's a big opportunity for us, especially if we can source some of the manufacturing jobs here in Canada. And we're seeing that happen with recent investments. But important here from a planning perspective, whenever there's a new building being built or renovation being made, really important to make sure that we're laying down the right electricity infrastructure so that chargers can either are part of that renovation or new build, or that they can easily be added. And really important, a lot of communities actually provide a lot of red tape in order for people to put in chargers on the curbside or wherever, in different parts of the community, and making it super easy and fast, making sure that there's no barriers for people to install chargers, and making sure that working with community to make sure that there's no charging deserts. There's lots of chargers and people don't feel like they have to have range anxiety. Animal meat, plant protein. We've spent a lot of money on food. We've seen the sort of rage beyond meat and all these types of sort of new plant proteins that are becoming a much more larger part of the culinary delights that we enjoy. Lots of opportunities here for us. There's all sorts of companies, including in Southern Ontario, that are real leaders in the plant protein space and in the sort of the field to fork kind of place. So looking at these mega trends and how can we make plant protein ensure that every event and every public facility that occurs in the community has as a default option a plant protein option, and looking to really make that part of the identity. Another opportunity here is greening the power grid. We're going from fossil grid to a green grid happening globally. Canada is one of the greenest grids in the world, but we have opportunities to improve that, particularly here. And what's driving this is economics, and what's needed to make this happen are power connections, some of them underground, some of them overground, and wind, solar, storage. Historically, there has been some opposition, sometimes funded by mysterious places that may not be completely free of other agendas. But there has been a lot of NIMBYism, not in my backyard wind, in parts of southern Ontario. And we really encourage communities to look at the opportunity of wind, being part of wind, and not just for the people who own the land, but for people who are in line of sight of the land, and also for community funds to benefit from some of those revenues, so that there's an upside for everyone. But we do need rural parts to have more wind turbines to enable this transition.
One more minute, Toby.
And so just in closing, this is a huge opportunity for Canada. We have all of the ingredients to succeed. We're in the middle of a secular transformation of the global economy from high carbon to low carbon. And we've got all the ingredients you need, from the natural resources to the technology to the humans to the financial capital. And really now it's just about getting serious and making sure that we don't rest on our laurels and seizing the opportunity ahead. This chart here shows the upside of that. We've been tracking at Corporate Knights the performance of the 100 most sustainable companies globally, large corporations globally, for over 16 years, since 2005. And the blue bar here shows the performance of the most sustainable companies. This is sector neutral, so it's not a sector thing. And the yellow bar shows the performance of just a benchmark, normal kind of comparator group companies. And you can see that over time, over 16 years, the sustainable companies have outperformed, and this trend is only accelerating. And so the communities get on side. There's great upside for the planet, for families, for your ancestors. And also, this is not about losing money anymore. This is about also having better prosperity. So with that, I'm happy to engage the discussion. Looking forward to hearing from Tanya and participating in the discussion. Thanks kindly.
That's great, Toby. Thank you so much for your insights. It's really exciting to hear about the transformations, about the opportunities, about the appetite for investment, and the ingredients to succeed. So I think that you've given us a really nice framework for our discussion. Now it's my pleasure to welcome back to Southern Georgian Bay, Tanya Sermon. Tanya is the CEO and the founder of the Center for Social Innovation. She was here in November of 2019 and gave a wonderful presentation on social innovation, which is now on the Institute's YouTube channel. We're grateful for the inspiration that she gave to us during that presentation. It's informed our discussion series from last year, Mapping Our Road to Recovery, as well as this year's Our Sustainable Future. Tanya is fueled by her belief in the power of collaboration and belonging. She knows that putting the right people in the room is only the first step in creating real change. You also need to build a culture where everyone knows they have a voice and they have value to radically redesign our own future. She did this kind of culture building with the Center for Social Innovation, and she's also using it for the work that she's doing with the Social Innovation Institute, which is an affiliated charity, and with Social Innovation Canada, to really unlock the social innovation community to get at the root causes of problems. Tanya knows building relationships between people is the foundation for a better world. And she also thinks it's a heck of a lot of fun. Please join me in welcoming Tanya Sermon.
Thanks, Rosalind. And thank you so much for having me. And hi, Toby, I miss you.
Hey, you're just like a couple blocks away, right?
Yeah, I know, really close. It's crazy. Toby was one of our very first members at CSI. And you know what? We've been battling and trying to figure out how to move this next economy stuff into the mainstream for 16, 17 years. And so it's such a pleasure just to watch the amazing work that you're doing, Toby. And so just to build on top of what Toby's already said, I guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to make sure that Marilyn doesn't start timing me until I actually have done that. Okay, can you guys see that screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. All right. So I want to extend what Toby has already started here by introducing you to our definition of the next economy. One where we decide we're putting the language of regenerative, equitable, and prosperous for all. And I'm going to learn how to actually go. I mean, look, nobody can deny, and Toby's identified the crisis, the intersectionality of the crisis that we're having right now between social, environmental, and economic systems, whether it's climate crisis, affordable housing, growing economic disparity, accelerating mental health issues. These are a collision. And in this collision with COVID-19, we're also seeing that some people are disproportionately affected. Women, new Canadians, low income, marginalized communities. And so ultimately right now, there is an opportunity, an enormous opportunity to take this moment of reflection and to use this as a way to redesign the economy that we want. And I loved your language of shapers, not takers, Toby, dead on. And that's what we're really trying to do at the Center for Social Innovation. Look, there's 1,000 different words for it, right? We are talking about sustainable, people-centered, circular, just, participatory, equitable. I don't care. Conscious capitalism, you call it what you want to call it. I really don't care. But I think what I'm really trying to invite is to say, when we use the word next economy, let us use this as an invitation to imagine, to co-create, to shape, and to participate in building the economic system that we want. And, you know, the system is global, but ultimately its implementation is hyper-local, right? And I know that you're in small town in Southern Georgian Bay area. And, you know, people will say, oh, Toronto, you're such a big city. Well, actually, we're 144 neighborhoods, and we operate and we support our local neighborhoods. We spend our capital in those neighborhoods. We build the relationships in those neighborhoods. And we have, as consumers, as voters, an opportunity to redefine those markets, to reshape those markets, and to create circular systems that are able to build a regenerative approach to how we build. And so some of the stuff that I want to layer on top of Toby's work is to really look at not just planet, but people and planet. And what is the circularity? How do we actually build an inclusive economic system that is creating the jobs and the quality of life while we create and respect nature and the planet? And this is the core of what we're trying to do. The next economy for us is one that puts people and planet first. And what we're trying to do, and I invite you to think about how this might work in your local community, is we're trying to build intentional economies, right? It's not just letting it happen to us, but it's about actually stepping up and being able to bring promising and transformative models and enterprises and solutions into reality. And that's where the relationship piece comes in, right? You don't do that alone. This is the kind of thing that you need to come together. And this is what's so exciting about your community. I mean, look how well organized you are. I'm so excited for you all. So how do we do this? And this is, you know, the model that we got here is a swirl, is a theory. We're trying to do it at CSI, but really what it's about is about looking at how we start convening the players, understanding the problems, building labs that allow us to dig into those challenges, and then evolving prototypes and solutions that might work out of the labs, and then looking at how we as a community are able to move them through to acceleration, ultimately, ideally to scale, if that makes sense, and to be able to access the supports that they need to survive. We're starting to do this in some of the labs work that we're doing around the financialization of housing, around homelessness and hygiene, and a myriad of other kinds of challenges. And what we're learning is that we need to understand the nature of the challenge. And then we need to work, we're really looking at how we bring that entrepreneurial spirit into the process of building these solutions. So just to kind of give you a little bit of a framework, you know, Marilyn asked me to kind of define some of these terms. And so I wanted to kind of introduce this concept of a social venture. We also call it social enterprise. And ultimately, it's an organization or initiative created to address a social challenge or to develop a systemic solution. So we mostly understand clean tech. We understand the green economy. We get that kind of stuff, but this is another layer on top. A social enterprise would be an enterprise that's created by or for marginalized communities to address a social problem, or a community enterprise to solve a community problem. And I say this because this is a growing number of people are starting to see the power of social enterprise. And much the way that we need to bring social and environmental together to create meaningful employment opportunities in order to address the issues of climate change. We also, I think, have an opportunity to see that as we're coming out of COVID, we're going to be exiting and entering into one of the most economic crises of our lifetimes. I mean, I'm personally quite concerned about the 11% unemployment rate and who's unemployed. And so one of the things that we know is that social ventures create 30% more jobs than the regular mainstream industry. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. And how are they doing it? Just real quick, just wanted to give you an update. Like the kinds of projects that we're supporting is Bruised, which is a Toronto-based women's organization startup to take imperfect food, to process it, and then to sell it into the market. It's a beautiful little social enterprise. Another one is Mayan Ziv, who was a part of our Agents of Change program years ago, who's now built Access Now, which is a digital platform to help guide people to be able to access buildings safely if you happen to use a wheelchair. And then we have some higher end examples like Flash Forest, which is this amazing, like kind of feels like post-apocalyptical. They bring drones in and they shoot tree growing out of the drones into areas that we wouldn't otherwise get able to get access to, so that we can start to reforest parts of Canada that wouldn't otherwise be accessible. But I want to take us a little deeper into the field of community wealth, because this is an area that I see as burgeoning right now. And I think it really intersects with some of the work that you guys are doing. There's not a lot of pictures here yet, because ultimately this stuff is really still emerging for us too. It's something that's come out of this moment of COVID. We're defining community wealth as an approach that builds collaborative and inclusive community-driven economies, so that communities can receive the benefits, the social and economic value that they create. And it's really about a more collaborative approach to how we are co-designing our communities. This work that we're doing right now in community wealth, we're basing it in Regent Park because we have deep roots there. But ultimately the thinking could go into any small town or community, any place where you have a rich social cohesion, and that you're able to start bringing together and convening a diverse group of multi-stakeholders. And this is one of the things that I'm so delighted to see the municipalities in your region coming together as partners to the table, looking at how you might bring in institutional partners as well, to take a look at how you can start to create these circular economies that are really able to put people and planet first. So just to kind of reflect, and I'll come back to the community wealth moment in a second, you know, the concept of an intentional community or an intentional economy is one where you get to design it. And this is key. I think we've spent most of our lives feeling disempowered, where we didn't know, we just let the economy happen to us. And I think what's happening is we're seeing a fundamental shift. We're watching as giant industries, you know, financial markets are coming on, and they are demanding a transformation. And to me, this is the most exciting moment in our history as we actually demonstrate the agency to be able to make that change. And so the question is, what's the enabling infrastructure that we're going to need in our communities in order to build these intentional economies? And so I just want to kind of, these were some initial thoughts that I was pondering in conversing with Marilyn about what does it take to create the enabling environment to build these economic systems intentionally. And I think number one is community cohesion. And I think you guys already have that. I mean, the fact that this is happening, that your community is coming together in this series to look at these issues. Like it's delightful. And then there's this whole world of community enterprise. What are the enterprises that are going to be creating the jobs or creating the value propositions that will be supporting this economic system? So whether it's inclusive businesses or enterprises that are engaging marginalized communities, or social ventures that are built within the not-for-profit model, or a community enterprise that's helping to incubate all of this goodness. There are so many different kinds of community enterprises that are available to us in our local communities. They need to be supported by a couple of things, right? They need to be supported by community finance. And so this is where you start to see things like community bonds or loan guarantees or community lending circles or neighborhood land trusts or community investment platforms. You're even seeing look at crowdfunding and how it has played a role in unlocking these ideas. Ultimately, you need to find buyers, right? And so lots of us understand the local buy local campaign. And we understand it. We know that our money goes a long way. But looking more deeply at not just buy local, yes, buy local, and what are the social procurement policies that our institutions or our governments, our municipalities might be able to put into place that would start to build the markets that will ensure that there is business for these community enterprises. So we're seeing in other jurisdictions how there's starting to become alignment between the buyers, the institutional partners that are the buyers, and then being able to help become intentional about the kinds of enterprises that they might like to buy from. So this is where we start to see the amalgamation, these ideas form what we're calling community wealth, right? Which is communities coming together to design the economic systems that reflect their values. So green, fundamentally sustainable, regenerative enterprises that are there to serve community, that are there to support those who are most vulnerable and those who are most marginalized, and also that are able to support the vibrancy, the joy. This is where you bring in the arts community. It's where you bring in cultural learning, education, and this is where the fun is had. Ultimately, I think what we're looking at is a fundamental shift in our values as humans. At our core, I think what COVID has done is has begged us to answer the question for ourselves individually and as communities of what does success actually look like? It's not how much we own or how nice our cars, or those Teslas are pretty sweet. It's really ultimately about the relationships that we hold, the joy that we're able to gain when we are in connection with one another. And so fundamentally, I think what's happening, I hope, is that we're shifting the paradigm from being about the economy and us being in service to it, and flipping it so that we can understand that the economic system was always here to support us, to support people and planet, and to be able to nourish our relationship with the earth, and not based in exploitation and extraction. So I'm super excited. I'm gonna end it there, Marilyn. I think I'm actually ahead of schedule. My dog is going at the back door, but I'm delighted, just delighted that you guys are taking on this adventure. And I just know what comes out of this gathering and this series of gatherings is going to be extraordinary. And just know that CSI is always here to help and be your best cheerleader. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much. The world needs more people who are behind other people. Thank you, Tanya. We all agree that this pandemic is presenting a moment in time for us to pause and to take the responsibility to transform things. I loved your positioning of the next economy as an invitation to intentionally design our economies. Your comments about community wealth and what that means, the players that are in that, social ventures, social enterprises, creating more jobs, 30% more jobs than traditional businesses, and the building of labs to actually really dive into some of these issues. As Toby said, we have the opportunity to redesign our shelter, transportation, food, and energy sectors. So it's given us a lot of food for thought. Thank you so much. Adam, I think we might have time for 1 or 2 questions to the speakers.
Thanks, Roz. So the first question I have, and because it was mentioned around people and planet, and there is a desire for a bias for action. So there's been a lot of good models and information presented, but as a community and as a region, there's a desire to how do we move things forward? And there's an importance around private sector, public sector, and the community coming together. But is there a playbook, or what is, some helpful ways that we can ensure that we will be successful as a community, as a region, to drive this forward? Because that's where we want to see rubber hit the road. And maybe Tanya, we can start with you and then move over to Toby in a couple minutes.
I wish there was a playbook, Adam. That'd be great, eh? Like, wouldn't that be sweet? I mean, look, I think the magic is in 2 or 3 things. I would say you've already built the collaboration, and you've got some amazing institutional partners and people with deep experience at your table. I mean, that's a phenomenal start. Mm-hmm. And then, you know what, I'm just going to say it, like, just try some shit. Like, yeah. Don't keep waiting. You don't need that. Like, try some things, experiment, create the kind of container. I mean, look, can you imagine a lab at a small town level? Like, wouldn't it be cool if we actually created the kind of container that would allow you to take the risks, to try things, and to not be feeling like you are going to be judged or, attacked? And maybe the collaboration of folks here can help mitigate the otherwise, constraints that municipality might have around that kind of risk taking. So my suggestion is that, I think the best way to start is to start where you are standing, and to take that idea that there's enough emotional resonance around. Because in my worldview, it's all about energy. Mm-hmm. And if you're angry about it, or you're determined about it, or you're feeling frustrated about it, I suggest you go grab that one, because that's the one that's going to give you the energy to push you forward and then you're going to make a ton of mistakes. I promise. It's going to be great. But just start.
Perfect. I like that. I like the entrepreneurial model piece that you had adopted to that. So that's great. Thank you. Toby, how about yourself?
I'm sure. I mean, sometimes people answer these questions. They say, look in the mirror, see what you can do. And I put a book there it's not a bad book. It's pretty good. I think it's called Project Drawdown. Paul Hawken wrote it. And it's like a bunch of consequential things we can do. One of the main things is be really careful of how you dispose of your fridge, especially if it's just a private sector garbage company taking it, because the greenhouse gases contained in the pipes at the back of the fridge might make your carbon footprint 10 times larger than it otherwise would be that year if it's not disposed of properly. So a bunch of things that individuals can do, but I think the nub of it is this is a collective problem, and it requires a collective solution. And I think the beauty of what you guys are doing, and all this energy that you corralled and organized here, is you can start to look at your community, whatever, whether it's municipality or the larger community. And I think coming up with a plan that looks at how do we get our rhythms in sync with nature across the major sort of aspects of the economy that we kind of laid out there in terms of the built environment, shelters, the power that we're getting, green power, the passive electrified shelters, homes, workplaces, making sure we have infrastructure so we can move people around without having to use fossil fuels, the charging infrastructure, the public buses and things like that that are being brought on board. And then the food, critically the food piece as well. How can we move off of fossil fuel farming into carbon positive farming that nurtures the land and makes it carbon positive, not addicted to nitrogen fertilizers that require massive amounts of loans and are sending many farmers into bankruptcy. So looking at how do we get into the rhythm. So it's really as simple as, making a plan. And of course, they say plans are useless, but planning is essential. But making a plan for what would it take to go from where you are now to a community that's in sync with nature across those 4 realms that we're talking about. And importantly, critically, what would it cost from an investment perspective, capital investment perspective? And how much of that would where would that money come from? So it can happen. And these are questions that I'm sure your collective skills and connections can bring about. You get something like that together, you rally the community around it. And then the question about where does the money come from, you've identified the sources and you go shake it down, dig into your own pockets. There's low cost capital that can be accessed. But a community-wide approach would be really hard to turn down, especially given that the economics are so compelling. And so I think if you really want to bring this all together, that's kind of what it comes down to, is creating a living plan with a living budget that gets something on the blackboard, and then getting the money together, and what gets funded gets done. So and I think the beauty is you have all the this is just a people power resource question, and it looks like you have a lot of the people power, and where there's will, there's a way. So that would be my encouragement.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. A quick question, and for both of you, is where have you seen successful models of this take hold? So again, that's a great plan. It'd be interesting to understand where we have seen success, or the inverse, where have you seen failure and things to avoid so that you don't end up going down that same path? Toby, maybe start with you.
Sure, I'm just looking up, I want to find the name of the community, but I'll put it in the chat after. There's a community that did a mass mobilization about 20 or 30 years ago doing deep energy retrofits. And it was a pretty good experience. What are examples of communities? I guess there's, you see communities that have banded together with cooperative finance and got solar panels placed, inexpensive solar panels placed on the roofs in all the community that are suitable, and getting storage involved. I think you've got examples like Solar Share, which is a cooperative based in Ontario that regular people can invest in for 4 or 5% return, and then the money is used to deploy solar. So I think there's a lot of examples if we look in the cooperative sector on the financing of these things and deploying of these things on a community scale. And there's a whole there's an investment bank now that Van City started called Van City Community Investment Bank. That's a Schedule I bank, and it's looking it deploys money exclusively in these themes, and so they have a lot of interesting stories as well. And I'm sure Tanya probably is she probably just looks at her inbox and then she's got stories everywhere coming in from her whole network. So
Tanya, I'll apologize. We do have to move on, but if we have time, I'll circle back to discuss. And if you do have examples, we would love to hear that in the chat as well, or we can do follow up. So I apologize. We are on a time crunch, and it's unfortunately time to move on. So I'm going to pass things over to Marilyn Struthers and Catherine Dawn now, because we're going to start to get into our breakout rooms or breakout sessions. So thank you very much. And over to you, Marilyn and Catherine.
So thanks, Toby and Tanya. So are we inspired? I don't know
Yes.
how many of you are watching the chat, but boy, we've got a library, I think, coming up here. It's terrific. And I know we talked, actually, was it today or yesterday, about putting a resource list up on the Institute's website. So Roz, I think we've got it.
Terrific.
I think we've got the library there. Tanya talked about labs, experimenting, trying things out. Well, folks, here we are. We're going to do the fastest mini lab on designing economy that you've ever seen. I have we have with us 10 facilitators. And in a few minutes, Brandon is going to parachute you into a room with a facilitator. We have Roz, Catherine Daw, June Porter, Sandy Trillo, Yvonne Hamlin, Adam Thackeray, who you've just been listening to, Julie Scarcella, Jack Vanderkoy, Zoe Thurling, and Lee Graves. And those folks have all been rather neatly primed to invite you to have a conversation about this question. If we were 10 times bolder in deciding the economy that sustains our community, what would we be doing? And we have the lovely Michelle, who's actually going to take the recording and the notes that those facilitators produce and develop us a local manifesto for what our next economy should look like. And then we're going to share those ideas back amongst ourselves in the last 20 minutes of this event. So between now and 6 o'clock, it's time for a revolution. Anything else time to tell you? For those of you who aren't familiar with breakout groups, you will get a little notice that invites you to join a breakout room. All you have to do is hit join. Magically, you get parachuted into this breakout room. Our facilitators may choose to record their session because facilitating and note-taking at the same time with something this much energy is a bit tough. That doesn't come to us, it just downloads to their computers. So you can say whatever you like in there and only the facilitator will have that information. And we'll give you, I think, Brandon, we said a 4-minute warning. So as the conversation begins to close, you'll be between 6 and 8, 10 people in a room. So do share the space. What we've asked our facilitators to do is look not for the best ideas, but for the range of ideas. So we're looking for the most ideas. So have at it, use what you've heard, what you already know. And then we'll reconvene. And for the last 20 minutes, we'll just do a lightning scan of what we got. Make sense? Brandon, you can hit go anytime. Well, you're all back. Parachuting in and out. It's great. Give me a thumbs up. How did that go? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Yeah? You had a good chat? That's great. Well, it's an experiment, and we'll look forward to when Catherine Daw sends you the post survey for your thoughts on how this kind of engagement, while we're still locked down into Zoom land. So I've just posted, someone says, Pamela says, I feel like Dorothy in Kansas. So, yeah. So let's just have a little think about what happened. I've just posted the question for you. What were the best ideas you heard for moving forward with sustainable communities? We'll ask our facilitators to report in for us, but don't stint here. Tell us what you think is best, and we'll be using those ideas as well from the chat when we do the paper afterwards. So are we all back now, Brandon? Perfect.
Yep, everybody should be back.
Okay, so let's go facilitator by facilitator. Roz, do you want to go first? What were the 2 or 3 very best ideas that you heard? We have maybe about 2 minutes each facilitator to respond.
From a broad strokes perspective, loudly and clearly that the municipalities could in fact reduce red tape around new ideas towards sustainability, could incentivize new ideas towards sustainability in every department. Some specific ideas that could be across the municipalities would be green roofs. There was a conversation around designing in the new subdivisions and how we need to put a new framework around that, where sustainability comes first. Better bylaws, lots of municipal stuff to unpack. Two clear ideas around taking the Collingwood terminals and using it as a local food production center as a model for the world, and then taking the Talisman ski resort site and partnering up with the Center for Social Innovation and creating a model for the world around regenerative agriculture, arts and culture, natural heritage, Indigenous training center, working with University of Guelph. There you go.
That's the fastest 2 good ideas I've heard in a long time. That's great. So you had no trouble getting lots of content on this one. That's terrific.
Good group.
Catherine Daw, where are you? And maybe you would keep it to 2 or 3 good ideas, knowing that we're going to have the rest of them in our notes, and there's tons of stuff coming in the chat too.
Yep. So I probably am going to not speed as much because I was just rapidly circling things, but certainly one of the main themes was that we need to have a bias towards action, that we need to engage as a community, and that people felt that these conversations that we're having is a good start. Also, there was some discussion about planning policies, in particular around, what we put on the land, which comes back to how do we do more sustainable development that really takes on things like making sure that we're off gas, that we're off the energy grid, and from that perspective, and onto electricity, and thinking about green in so many different ways. There was a real sense that we're at a tipping point, and that we can demonstrate by leading by example. Certainly a local entrepreneurship, especially around arts and culture, would be one piece. And then there was just a general talk about some other things around government policies that would allow some credits to allow us to do some of those good things, as opposed to having to carry it on our own backs. And things like community bonds came up, as well as that each municipality should take on a project, and we should just get started.
Great.
That's from me.
Thank you. June Porter.
It was some interesting things, basically even encouraging communities to have older homes, have some of their taps and toilets refitted. So on a small scale. We had a bold idea, which was good, is just a town saying to the developers, you cannot have a gas line. So you can build a home for sale, but you can't put gas in. And sometimes bold decisions like that may change. There seems to be some inconsistency with electrical chargers. Some towns require them to be put in a new build, others don't. I picked that up. There was interesting around wind turbines, as it's a source of green energy, but maybe we don't go about the right way of engaging the community. It was an excellent example, as in Scandinavia, the community buys into it, but it's not the person with the turbine that solely benefits. It's the community that surrounds the turbine. So a lot of objection then goes away. So that could be an interesting approach, and we haven't thought about that way. One of the people talked about a missed opportunity that they had with agrominia, so engaging a place to grow old and agricultural, and a collection of government, private investment, etc. But we encouraged, because it didn't happen, this could be the next opportunity to happen. This could be the catalyst. So, and you bring forward lessons learned.
Great, thank you. Okay, so it's really hard to keep it to 2 or 3 top ideas, isn't it? I can tell. That's good. It means these breakout groups were fun, but I do need you to keep it fairly short because there's 10 facilitators. Sandy Trillo.
Hi there. So we had a couple of somewhat similar themes. There was some work that's already underway that people are supportive of, such as an arts and culture center in Collingwood, and that being community owned and really engaging the community in the process of building that. A theme around, partnerships, how important partnerships are in doing any of this work. So bringing people in with different ideas and the creativity that generates. There's some efforts to develop social enterprises in the Grey Highlands and West Grey, and they're both enabling people to learn about them and also, how to create community-owned enterprises. One of the wouldn't it be great was about what if we had some grants to actually fuel the ideas that are generated through that. So that kind of community finance is a dimension of it. And then finally, with people spending a little more time close to home, what is the ecotourism evolution of the tourism industry up here? And at the same time, an acknowledgement of how that brings a pressure on all the communities here that we're not necessarily ready for. So that's
Good.
where we were.
Thank you. Yvonne Hamlin. Where are you? There you are.
Here I am. Thanks, Marilyn. We had a great group, And I will try and, whoops, if I mute myself. Okay, we had a great group, and I'll just focus as you're asking on a couple of things. There was an acknowledgement that tourism has been a backbone, of course, of this region, but maybe it's time not to have it be the entire focus moving forward. And as our new economy starts to think about what kind of manufacturing should we have in our country, are there businesses that we could encourage and support here that would be part of the supply chain, if I can put it that way, for our future needs? And maybe some of them are suited to rural areas. The other point I'll mention is our future workforce, because of course, the future is young people, and particularly we had a discussion around millennials. And, you know, how do we continue to develop our economies to attract millennials and the younger generation? And will that require some real thinking around how we want our workforce to develop? Whether it be into trades or helping people transition into second careers or manufacturing. So those are the ones I'll mention. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. There's some decided themes emerging, as we listen across. Adam, Thackeray.
So a couple of the big ones for us was, one was better than 50% tree canopy. So this goes back to green and being net zero. Having an immense focus on community. So as we adopt technology and growth, it's still keeping focus on the community, you know, leaving no one behind, ensuring that there is inclusivity and diversity as things grow. So it is sustainable for all parties as we bring in more people to the community. We want to have as much control of our footprint and reuse of things. So we want to be recycling and rejuvenating things so that there is less waste and self-sustainability on the region as well as the country. And then having more evangelists, so having more power brokers, if you will, both locally and internationally, that are evangelizing and driving the change so that it actually takes fold and, you know, shifts from ideation to actually action, execution, and delivery.
Great, thank you. Julie.
Thank you. Great team. Their input was really focusing on, well, came up with a number of themes, but really attainable housing and driving attainable housing and looking at the tiny house models and co-housing and having a pilot project that could perhaps embrace alternative solutions for farming for those small, intimate, smaller communities, and really driving the affordable attainable housing strategy more regionally. And then Toby, I have to quote the three things about making decisions. Something that as a decision-making process, three things to consider. Always considering zero carbon, the circular economy, and community enhancement. And then the last real bullet was, Nancy, really looking at our food security, agricultural, coming up with some different innovative ways to really drive a regional lens on food security with some projects and looking at green roofs and really driving that connection of more cohesive communities. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Jack Vanderkoy.
Yeah, we had a great discussion. The theme that came up very quickly was to recognize the rights of nature. We live in such a beautiful area. We want to retain that. So that means maintaining the trails, putting in ordinances and regulations in terms of building, that homes are efficient, using geothermal, for instance, as an example. And another one is respecting our farmers and working with our major suppliers, our major like grocers to source locally and source from organic produce from our local supplier or local farmers, but then also to create an app for people to use to find these roadside stands. A lot of times you kind of run into them by accident. This is an idea where you could actually get an app and show it on your Google map or something. So that was the big theme that came through, cleaning up, that type of thing, taking personal responsibility and getting community action involved. Another one was just our regional hospital. Like we need to look at our healthcare system and find alternate solutions to what we currently have. The process is moving very slowly, and is there a way that we can accelerate that? Nobody had an answer for that one, but we did target it as an issue that needs to be addressed.
Okay, thank you. That's quite a range in your group.
Yeah.
Well, quite a few different topics there. Zoe Thurling.
Thank you, Marilyn. So we had 3 main themes in our talk. So community energy, land development / housing, and civic and municipal engagement. So first off with the community and energy, there was a great example brought up by Rod, and he was talking about The Leap, which is a book about a town in Denmark who came together, the public and the municipal government, and they all agreed to install solar. So the cost of that was added to their tax bill, and the income used to pay off the debt. And then 3 to 5 years down the road, they had dividends. So that was a beautiful example. We also were talking about land development and housing. And it was interesting. On the one hand, we heard in some municipalities, people are deeply craving engagement at a high level to say, how should we design our communities? What are the important features? And then on the flip side, there were people saying, well, there are councils also reaching out to civic people and finding they're not gaining the kind of engagement they had hoped for. So that was an interesting difference among our communities. And finally, with land development and housing, and I think it's one of those galvanizing issues. And Rod mentioned that, bringing a galvanizing issue that's impacting everyone could be a key to enabling our successful collaboration on that issue, such as housing. That's it.
Okay, good. That's an interesting strategy, right? I think about how COVID has been such a galvanizing issue on so many fronts. That's pretty interesting to think about how we do that strategically. Lee Graves.
Thanks, Marilyn. Well, lots of wonderful ideas have been presented, and our group spoke about them as well. Especially, we talked about wind turbines and agreed with the previous point. We went down a road of worrying a fair bit about the politics of all of this, and the need to depoliticize ideas, to remove that risk of an idea being taken by one political party, and then when political parties change, all the gains are lost. So trying to build non-governmental entities that will anchor these change initiatives. That was one important idea. Carbon budgeting. This came in the context of being able to actually value economically these changes, understand what the returns would be. And so social and environmental returns need to be valued properly. To understand the value of the changes, it's important to be able to communicate this to the larger community in order to get support. But yet again, trying to do this in a way that is not political. And finally, the third point was we must value nature, which has been said earlier. So I thank everyone on my committee. It was a great chat.
Wow, what a rich set of conversations. And for those of you scanning the chat, you'll see there's a ton more there. So what we will do with this is condense it down into its key themes. I've heard it can go into 3 pages, so we'll have to see how we make out, but you'll get this back in some way publicly as a discussion document further on down the road. Thank you so much for being willing to take the experiment, and to our 10 facilitators. We'll be in touch tomorrow just to see how it all went for you, but as we learn to do this. But thank you so much for convening and taking the risk with us to do this. And I'll pass it over to you, Roz.
Thanks, Marilyn. That was a lot of fun. and a lot of powerful stuff came out of it. There's so many people to thank. First of all, I'd like to thank our extraordinary speakers, Toby and Tanya. You shared so much of your expertise, so much of your knowledge and your wisdom. Thank you for your inspiration as well. It will definitely help to inform the remaining events in this series. Our thanks goes to our municipal lead partners as well, Meaford, the Town of Blue Mountains, Grey Highlands, and Collingwood. Also our supporting partners, Centre for Business, Julia White of the Cooperators, and Greenland Engineering Consultants. Design team, you've put a lot of effort into this. Thank you so much. Wonderful breakout session facilitators, thank you. And special thanks to Marilyn and to Adam for co-hosting today. Our biggest thanks, of course, go to all of you who participated. We've had an amazing richness in terms of the discussion and the idea exchange. I hope that you will all continue to participate in the series. One event builds on the other. So in May, on Wednesday, May 12th, our next event will be the changing role of municipalities. And this is where, you know, more and more municipalities are wanting community engagement. They know it's good for the well-being of the community. We're going to be inviting mayors to be featured as main speakers, but I am sure that there's going to be another lively breakout session. So please put that on your calendar, Wednesday, May 12th at 4:30 to 6 p.m. If you missed any of the events, you can catch them on our YouTube channel. There are recordings of them, and we are amassing, as Marilyn pointed out, a series of notes which will be reported back to all of you. So thank you. Everyone, and thanks again. We'll see you on May 12th.